Hi everyone, I've had this top saved on my Pinterest board since last year and I've been waiting to make it for ages. I finally got around to doing it and now it's my absolute favorite for summer. I just had to share the process with you. And do you know what the best part is? It's a beginner-friendly tutorial with no pattern needed. We're going to be self-drafting it to fit our own measurements, so you can easily customize it to your body. I'm super excited to walk you through this step-by-step tutorial, so let's get sewing. To make this top, you'll need about 1.5 meters of fabric. I used a lightweight cotton, but anything similar would work. You'll also need a little extra fabric to double the front piece. I've used this white cotton. Then to draft your pattern, you will need either a tank top like this, that's wider at the shoulder, or a t-shirt. Make sure the shoulders sit right, so not oversized, and that the body is loose enough for comfort because cotton doesn't stretch and we are going to make our top out of cotton fabric. You also need some narrow elastic for the bottom of the sleeves and of course general sewing tools, fabric scissors, pins, matching thread, a sewing machine and an iron. First take the top you already own and fold it in half like this. Now make a mark where you want the bodice, so the top part of your top to end. I chose a length of 27 centimeters and that includes half a centimeter for seam allowance, but you can try it on and mark wherever you want your peplum to start. For reference, I'm a size 36 with a small chest, so feel free to adjust the measurement to suit your own fit. Now lay your top flat on some pattern paper, or you can even use some wrapping paper. I've placed it on the edge of the paper so it will be easier to cut out. Then carefully trace around the front side of the top. I've added half a centimeter seam allowance around the shoulder, the armhole and the side of the top. Then you can go ahead and cut out the pattern. Don't forget to write front or something similar on it so you don't mix it up later. Next, flip the top over and trace the back side the same way. Add half a centimeter seam allowance on the shoulder, armhole and on the side. Then cut it out and don't forget to mark where the fold is. The back of the top will be cut on fold. So these are the two pattern pieces for the bodice. Now place your front pattern onto your main fabric and cut out two pieces mirroring each other. Then take the back pattern, place it on the fold of the fabric and cut out one back piece. Make sure the fabric is folded neatly so your back piece is symmetrical. After you've cut out your main fabric pieces, do the same with your lining fabric, so with the white fabric. Cut two more front pieces mirroring each other and one back piece on the fold. This lining will give the top a nicer finish and a bit more structure. Next, I gave all my pieces a quick press with the iron to make them nice and flat. Then working with my main fabric first, I placed the pieces like this, so the front piece over the back piece and pinned them together at the shoulders and at the sides. After pinning, I sewed the shoulders and the side seams and then did the exact same thing with my lining fabric. After sewing the main fabric and the lining separately, I took a few minutes to press and open the seams with my iron. This helps the top sit nicely and give a much cleaner finish later on. Make sure you press the shoulder seams and the side seams on both the main fabric and the lining pieces. Once that's done, it's time to join the main top and the lining together. I placed the two tops one inside of the other with the right sides facing each other, meaning the nice sides of the fabric should be touching on the inside. Then I carefully matched up the seams at the shoulders and at the sides. This is very important so the top looks neat when it's finished. Then I pinned everything in place all around the neckline and front edges, making sure it was smooth and even. And once everything was pinned securely, I set the top aside for a moment to work on the ties. For the ties, I cut out 6 strips of fabric, each 6 centimeters wide and 55 centimeters long. But after finishing, I realized that 40 centimeters would have been enough, so I'd recommend cutting them around 40 centimeters long. I just wanted to make sure they weren't too short. Fold both long edges of the strip in towards the center, kind of like making a bias binding where the raw edges are tucked inside. Press them down flat as you go, making sure both edges are neatly folded in. Then fold the entire strip in half lengthwise with the folded edges on the inside and press again to keep it all in place. Now sew a straight stitch along the open edge, making sure it's all nice and neat. This will give you nice fabric ties with the raw edges tucked inside. Now let's get back to the bodice and pin the ties in place. You'll need to pin 3 ties on each side of the bodice. I wanted my first tie to sit exactly at the neckline, so I placed it in between my main fabric and my lining fabric and pinned that in place like this. I did the exact same thing on the other side. I wanted the tie at the bottom to sit near the bottom edge of the bodice, so I pinned that in place as well. Then I measured the space between the 2 ties, found the center and pinned the 3rd tie right in the middle. Next I sewed along the neckline and the front opening of the top in one continuous line. Now it's time to turn the top right side out. Gently pull the fabric through the opening, making sure the ties are all neatly in place. Give the top a good press with the iron. Ironing helps the seam sit flat and give your top a clean finished look, especially around the neckline and the front opening. Now let's move on to the peplum. For the peplum, you want to cut out a rectangle that is about twice the width of the bottom edge of your bodice. My bodice measures 50 centimeters across, but remember that's for the front and the back, so when you double that, you get 1 meter. So for the peplum, I decided to go with 2 meters of fabric. Next, you'll need to decide how long you want your peplum to be. I've gone for 28 centimeters, which includes seam allowance for the hem, but feel free to play around with the length and proportions. You can customize it to fit your style, so don't be afraid to adjust the measurements. So I've cut out a rectangle for the peplum measuring 2 meters by 29 centimeters. To gather the fabric, I've used the longest stitch length on my sewing machine and sewed a straight line along one of the longer edges. Make sure to leave a longer thread at the beginning and at the end of your stitching, and don't backstitch it either end. Once you've sewn the line, gently pull on one of those threads to start gathering the fabric. Use your fingers to evenly distribute the gathers along the edge. Take your time and keep the gathers nice and even all the way across. This will give the peplum that nice voluminous look once it's attached to the bodice. Before attaching the peplum, let's hem the shorter sides of the rectangle. This will be the front of the top. To do this, fold each short edge of the fabric inwards twice and pin it or press it with your iron to hold it in place. I recommend starting to sew this hem right under the stitch you made for the gathers, as you may still need to pull on those threads a little bit while attaching the peplum. Alternatively, you could hem the edges first and then do the gathering, which would probably be easier, but I forgot to do it in that order, so this method still works fine. When it's time to attach the peplum, you have 2 options depending on your experience level. Option 1, for a more professional finish, you can fold both of the lining and the main fabric of your bodice inwards and sew the peplum in between those layers. This method creates a really clean finish, but it can be a bit tricky, especially if you're newer to sewing. If you're looking for an easier method, you can first sew the main fabric and the lining together at the bottom, creating a continuous piece, and once that's done, you can simply attach the peplum to the bottom edge. This method is a bit simpler, but it still looks great. Pin the peplum in place along the bottom edge of the bodice, making sure the gathers are evenly distributed all the way around. Do as I say, not as I show here. I accidentally pinned the peplum the wrong way around in this video, so let me clear that up for you. When you pin the peplum to the bodice, make sure the right sides of the peplum is facing the right side of the main fabric of the bodice. This ensures that when you sew it, everything lines up properly and you won't end up with the wrong side showing on the outside. Now let's move on to the sleeves. Start by cutting out 2 rectangles of fabric, each with a width that's twice your arm circumference. The width depends on where you want your sleeves to sit, so how long you want them to be. For me, I wanted mine to be just below the elbow, so my arm circumference is about 30 centimeters, which means I cut my rectangle to 60 centimeter wide. As for the length, measure from your shoulder to your desired sleeve length, and then add extra 4 centimeters for hemming and seam allowance. For my sleeves, I chose a length of 40 centimeters, so my rectangles were 60 by 44 centimeters. Next, I folded each rectangle in half, making sure the right sides were together. Then I drew a slanted line from the top corner, from the folded corner, down to the side of the rectangle. As you can see, it was about 16 centimeters. This line shapes the sleeve a bit like a sleeve pattern would, but I made it myself instead of using a pre-made sleeve pattern. This is not the most professional way to create sleeves. I could have sliced the sleeve pattern like I did in other videos, which would be more precise, but I think this method is much easier, especially for beginners, and it still works great. Then cut out your sleeves, place them right sides facing each other, pin the 2 long sides of each sleeve together, and sew using a straight stitch. After you've sewn the side seams, press them flat using an iron. Then measure and cut out 2 pieces of elastic band that will fit comfortably around the area of your arm where you want the sleeves to sit. Make sure the elastic is snug but not tight. It should gather the fabric slightly without digging into your skin. And then create the tunnel for the elastic by folding the fabric inwards twice. Make sure it's wide enough to fit the elastic. Sew it all the way around and make sure you leave a small opening to be able to insert the elastic. Take a safety pin and attach it to one end of the elastic, then use the safety pin to carefully thread the elastic through the opening. Pull the elastic all the way around until it's fully inserted into the sleeves. Once the elastic is in place, overlap the ends and sew them together using a zigzag stitch. And finally sew up the small opening closed where the elastic was inserted. Now you need to gather the upper part of the sleeve just like you did for the peplum. Using the longest stitch length on your sewing machine, sew a straight line around the top edge of the sleeve. Once you've sewn the line, gently pull on one of the threads to start gathering the fabric. Make sure you distribute the gathers as evenly as possible. You want the sleeves to gather slightly to create a nice soft puffed effect on the top. Before attaching the sleeves, I decided to sew the lining to the main fabric around the armholes. This step helps to keep everything neat and secure when you attach the sleeves. Next, take your sleeves and place them right sides together with the right side of the bodice. Pin the sleeves at the armholes, making sure the gathers are evenly distributed. Once everything is pinned in place, sew along the armhole to attach the sleeves to the bodice. Be sure to sew carefully and make sure the sleeve is properly aligned to the armhole. And we're almost done. The final step is to hem the bottom of the peplum. Fold the raw edge of the fabric up by about half a centimeter, press it with an iron and then fold it up for a clean finish. Sew along the hem to secure it in place. If you'd like, you can also use a zigzag stitch on any raw edges or areas inside the top that don't look neat. This helps finish the inside of the garment and prevents fraying. I also decided to press the gathers with the iron to make them lay a bit flatter. Pressing helps smooth out the fabric, but you can skip this step if you prefer a fuller look for your gathers. And I also adjusted the length of my ties. As I told you before, they were a bit long at the beginning. And that's it, you've made your very own beautiful top with the peplum and gathered sleeves. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and I'd love to see your version of the top. If you make it, make sure you tag me on Instagram. Thanks for following along and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!